Hello, Braden. What's going on? What's going on? Just getting started right now. Let me know I'm taking requests. About to do auctions here in a bit. Let me know if you're looking for any team. I got numbered cards, autograph cards, patch cards. Just let me know.
High value positions to be playing on rookie contracts. Also, do you see a future point when Detroit will be in a difficult position because of how they drafted in 2023? Do you think Detroit's 2023 draft and results will cause other teams that want to win now to leave the reservation in the 2024 draft?
It's a good question. So the top four picks for the Lions, remember, were Jahmyr Gibbs, running back.
Yep.
Jack Campbell, linebacker.
Yep.
Sam Laporta, tight end. And Brian Branch, safety / corner, nickel, whatever you want to call it. So I would say, first question, did those all fill positions of need? Gibbs did, not from the perspective of they needed a running back, but they needed an explosive running back because they'd already signed David Montgomery. Jack Campbell did not actually fill a position of need. He stepped onto the depth chart as the fourth linebacker. They were actually very deep at linebacker.
Yeah, I mean, I think my initial reaction to the question is I don't agree with the premise that their first four picks were picking areas of need. I think
there's some truth to it, though. I'm trying to go through all the picks to describe whether or not they were.
Yeah.
So Gibbs, kind of a need. I would say Campbell, not a need. I would say Sam Laporta at tight end. They had Brock Wright, right? And
yeah, they had traded away Hawkinson.
They had traded, yeah. So I'd say that was a need. That's fine. They needed a 3-down tight end, say. And then Brian Branch, did they need a nickel? They had just signed
Chauncey Gardner-Johnson,
right? So it wasn't really a need. It actually felt redundant as a pick. So I would say 2 out of 4.
They brought in, remember, that offseason, they had brought in Sutton, Mosley, and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to effectively eliminate the need in the secondary, which wasn't to say they weren't going to draft anybody, but it meant it was no longer a need. Like they had actually removed the need with the free agent moves so that you could have a flexibility to go and draft different positions. And then they end up drafting a guy for that position anyway.
So the basic premise, I don't think they just went and checked needs off.
No.
And then the idea that, okay, you can copy that. I don't think, I use the phrase all the time. There's a difference between strategy and a prayer, right? Strategy and like a hope, right? Which is the idea that, hey, we want to get pressure with our front four isn't really a strategy because you need a front four who are really good pass rushers. And any team would want that. The bigger thing is the actual evaluation of those 4 players who are rushing the passer. So I think that's what happened with the Lions. Jack Campbell wasn't great this year, but the other 3 really were. And I think they're going to hit at the end of the day on all 4 players as players. So I think that's the bigger thing, right? They found 4 good players. And I bet if you ask the Lions, and not just the post-draft talk, hey, you took this guy and you took that guy, they would say, we trusted our board, right? We didn't reach. Even though people expected Jack Campbell to go, say, in the 30s or 40s, and they took him at 18, they took the best guy on their board, right? So I do believe that they would tell you that. I don't think they sat there and said, we're going to fill these depth chart spots. We'll take the linebacker at 18, even though he's 30th on our board. I think they took the best players. So I would say from our view, I don't know that they filled needs. From Detroit in the building, I don't think they sat there and filled needs. And the bigger reason why it worked is I think their evaluations were good and they found good players.
Yeah, to me, I don't think the way to frame that draft strategy for Detroit last year is filling needs versus drafting quote unquote best player available. I think the way to frame that evaluation is high value positions versus lower value positions and good players, right? So that was the interesting element of that draft is even at the time, our analysis was not, we don't like the players that Detroit drafted. It was, we like all of those players that Detroit drafted. What we don't like is the value positions that they were picking at specific spots in the draft. So they had 2 high draft picks. They had 2 first-round picks, and they spent them on 2 of the lower value positions that it seems to be the way the league operates right now, running back and off-the-ball linebacker. And then they followed that up with tight end and safety / slot corner. So to me, the analysis for Detroit is, okay, some people have been pushing this idea of, you know, the higher up in the draft you are, the more you should lean towards higher value positions. Whereas Detroit seemed to approach this is, we're just going to grab the guys we're the most confident in are good football players. And if it happens to be at a low value position, we don't care. Like that appears to have been their approach last season. And at least initially,
just getting started.
Incredible
about to run auctions here in a bit.
had maybe the best
Also
rookie
taking
season tight end has
requests.
ever had.
And
Jameer Gibbs made a material difference. That
teams,
offense
players,
was an
whatever you're looking for, let
explosive
me know.
playmaker
Let you know what I
when they
got.
played him at running back and sort of forgot the other stuff. Brian Branch came in, was an immediate upgrade as a slot corner. And then the only one that didn't really make a big impact was Jack Campbell as their off-the-ball linebacker. So that is if there's a takeaway from that class, if teams are looking at what Detroit did last year and sort of saying, should that influence what we're doing this year, it's, you know, we have a couple, like teams that have maybe a couple of first-round picks or teams that are just well-positioned in the draft. But you know, everyone's saying we need to pick a wide receiver, we need to pick an edge rusher, we need to pick, you know, the high value positions. Do they just say, look, we're just going to grab the guys that we think are really, really good, we're most confident in being good football players? It doesn't matter if it's this high. So that's where, you know, we had this debate with Bijan Robinson. We had this debate with Kyle Hamilton. I think this year, the two guys maybe that debate should be surrounding are Jackson Powers Johnson and maybe Graham Barton, depending on where you want to play him. Like, these are two guys that we should be asking, how high can you draft them, as opposed to, well, it's only a center or an interior guy. We don't take those in the top 10 or whatever. Well, if you're that confident he's really good, why not? Like, if you have a need at that spot, it's not a good draft for those interior players, and we think they're really good. Why can't I draft them at 12 or whatever?
So I would say a couple thoughts on this. By the way, if you did want to look back at the draft for need strategy, the one off the top of my head that was very extreme and worked was the 2020 Bucks. So they had just signed Tom Brady, and they bring in Gronk and the whole thing, and the Bucks went into the draft with no right tackle and a starting safety position open. And the Bucks basically said, okay, there was 4 tackles being talked about as top 10 caliber tackles. There was Andrew Thomas, Jedrick Wills, Mekhi Becton, and Tristan Wirfs. And the Bucks were sitting there at pick 14 or something like that. And they spent the whole first round. They tried to get up as high as 7. I think they got up to just 13. Like, they just traded up one spot to 13, I believe it was, to take Tristan Wirfs. Just because they said, we need a tackle. We need to fill this right tackle spot. And Tristan Wirfs goes in and is an outstanding rookie right tackle for a Super Bowl winning team. The second pick was Antoine Winfield, steps in immediately as a starter for the Bucks, is a very good safety. That's actually a strategy that I think was on the extreme end of filling needs. Now, again, if you asked Jason Light in Tampa Bay, he would probably tell you, well, no, Tristan Wirfs was a top 3 or 4 player for us. And yeah, we had Winfield. We had a first-round grade on Winfield and got him in the second. So say what you want. I don't know. But that felt like we filled needs and then went and won a Super Bowl with it when Brady came in, and we made sure that we had most of our needs filled in free agency, but we had these drastic holes on our starting lineup going into the draft. The other thing I'll say is that I trust my draft model, as you know, Sam, and I've tested it agnostic of positional value. And I've gone in and said, well, what if I just took the best running back? If I really just took the best player on my board in every round historically, regardless of position, running back, defensive line, it doesn't matter. I mean, for me, it worked out over time as far as bringing more wins to the table than, say, the average draft from the NFL or even the best drafts from the NFL. I mean, it worked that well. So there's a part of me that thinks if you really do have an edge from an evaluation standpoint, it doesn't necessarily matter over time. But you also would want to hedge a little bit because it comes down to the finances and scarcity, right? So when you talk about positional value, I tweeted this stat the other day, right? Edge rushers. Where do edge rush starters come from? 61% of first rounders become starters. Only 25% of second rounders become starters. Now, if you don't want to use starters, use solid players or whatever you want to call it. It's drastic. 30% become solid by my numbers here. 0% in the second round. I mean, that's just you find your best edge rushers in the first round, and then at the end of their 4 years and 5 years, their contract is in line with the rest of the league. It's not drastic. We mentioned this before. Like Jahmyr Gibbs' contract in years 4 and 5 are going to be, or year 5 in particular, are going to be one of the highest running back contracts in the league. So even if he's a good player, it's the scarcity and the contract value issue. Same thing with a Jack Campbell. Is he going to be getting high-end linebacker money at the end of his 5 years? So it's a short and long-term play that you're discussing when you talk about positional value, and it's also a scarcity issue. Do I, if I could find a starter in the first round, fine, but can I also find that same caliber player later in the draft?
Yeah, it's an interesting draft class because I don't think there are that many of those really good players at low value positions where you have to ask that question, the way we're asking for Hamilton or Linderbaum or the running backs, Bijan Robinson or whatever. When you look at the first half of the first round, it's difficult actually to find a landing spot for interior offensive linemen. It probably starts the window at 16 for Seattle. It's not that the teams in the top half don't need offensive linemen, but the ones that do tend to need tackles as well. So they're probably going to focus on tackle. Actually, the player to ask the question about is Brock Bowers. So one of the top 5 players in the draft, maybe by sort of position agnostic big boards, but he's a tight end. And we've just done this dance already with Kyle Pitts, and that hasn't necessarily worked out amazingly. But Brock Bowers is the guy where if you're like Detroit's strategy last year being played out this year would have a team drafting Brock Bowers in the top 10, right? Yeah. He might not go in the top 10. He might, we had him slipping all the way to 18 to Cincinnati the other day in a mock draft, right? Mm-hmm. So Brock Bowers is the player where
line autos, no line autos, man. Sorry.
The lesson from Detroit's draft strategy would be we need a tight end. Brock Bowers is amazing. I don't care that he's a tight end. We're drafting him at number 10 overall if we're the New York Jets, or number 5 overall for the Chargers because we need offensive weaponry. Like that would be the lesson.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting one because I think some teams will look at Bowers and say, well, yeah, he's an unbelievable tight end. We don't see guys like this before. Therefore, he's going to go in the top 8 to 10, whatever it might be. Well, that was a good question. I thought we gave a thorough answer.
Yeah, that's the idea.
If you have a family like I do, then you need to get term life insurance to protect them. That's right. It's one of the smartest financial decisions you can make. And this is the best time of the year to get it done so you can focus on whatever else the year has in store for you. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help you get a high-quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Fabric has flexible policies that fit your family and your budget, like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Get your personalized quote in just minutes, and then apply when it's convenient for you. It's all online and on your schedule.
Yeah, I got some.
You go from start to cover in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. So join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Insurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. Man, we used to have a really good terms and conditions guy at this company, but he gone.
No longer. You ready for the next question?
Yeah.
So this one is essentially, it's a Vikings-related question that has 3
right now,
parts
this is
that are
the
all
first
related to
one
trades
that
this year. From Mike. If you can discuss, not your friend Mike, just a different Mike.
Not Mike, not my buddy Mike. No. Okay. Mike, so it wasn't you. You could email us, though, if you wanted.
Yeah. Number 1. Is it possible that the Vikings have put in a call to all teams picking in the top 10 to let them know that they will beat any offer to move up? Minnesota simply has much more trade ammo than the Broncos or the Raiders. This would allow them to let the market decide if they need to trade up as opposed to guessing. Realistically, I don't see another team being able to match what the Vikings can offer. Number 2, if they move into pick number 5, I don't see how they would need to give the Chargers much more than picks number 11 and 23.
And
first round.
That's
basically a first-round pick for this year to move up 6 spots and select the 4th best quarterback. I understand quarterbacks come with a premium, but a 2025 first-rounder on top seems like complete overkill. Not to mention, I believe the Chargers are far from ambivalent here and really want this deal to happen too, i.e. they're desperate to trade out. Number 3, I don't think it's worth discussing a Viking-Cardinals trade. Based on free agency, Arizona seems to be certain they're drafting a top wide receiver, and I don't see how that remains true if they trade back to number 11. Marvin Harrison Jr. seems like a perfect fit there, especially with the optics of them acquiring a new legacy wide receiver like they had in Larry Fitzgerald. The runway seems to be cleared for a top wideout to be added, plus in a vacuum, the Vikings do not need to go beyond pick number 5 for McCarthy. Thoughts?
feel like the first question's from a professional negotiator. He's seeing the big picture, right? You're sitting. The question was essentially the Vikings have the best ammo to move up. Yeah, they hold 2 first-round picks, so they call every team in the top 10 and they say, "Send us your best offer, we'll top it." And if they don't get a call back, they're like, "Oh, sit at 11, we'll get our guy."
I mean, I think, yeah, from a process standpoint, at the very minimum, they should be telling every team from 2 to 5.
Yeah, we're willing to. What would it take?
Not even what we're like. Okay, explore the trade, but also, yeah, like just telling them don't take an offer before asking us to beat it.
Yeah,
like just get yourself, and because there's no reason any team sitting there in that range wouldn't make that phone call, right? You see that in these post-draft videos that come out all the time, right? Where there's a team trying to work a trade and there's someone else on the phone, like, well, go see if they'll beat it, and they don't, or whatever, and the trade gets happened. Like, there would be no reason for them not to make that clear to every team that's potentially going to move, right? If you're fielding phone calls, don't take a deal before calling us and seeing if we'll do better, because we have more ammunition than most of these other teams. We went and got the second first-round pick. We got 23, to do this. So, yeah, I think, number one, I'm sure that's happened, that they've said to all those teams,
Hoffman, what's up, man?
Don't make a deal
Know if you're looking for
before
anybody
giving us a
specific.
shout, because we can potentially do better. The number 2 one, do they
What's
need to
going
give
on,
up
yo?
more than 11 and 23 if they trade into the Chargers pick?
I don't know if anybody's
ultimately,
interested in
it
Jordan
kinda
Love,
depends
but I'm
what
about
else
to
is on
run
the table,
this
right?
one right here.
But again, I don't know if any team. So if another team comes up, so the Chargers are sitting at 5, and let's just say it's the Broncos.
I also don't know, by the way, that the Chargers, the Chargers being desperate to trade out of that pick was sort of
I don't know if Jordan Love's going to be able
Now
to
they're kind of in the
repeat
same
what
boat
he's
that Arizona is,
going to
which
be
is
doing this, or what he did
we don't
last
have
year. It's
a
going to be
receiver
interesting to see.
anymore. Our
So.
top guy is Quentin Johnson, and even if we're pivoting to a hardball, run-heavy offense,
If y'all looking for anybody
you
specific,
still
let me
need
know.
somebody to throw the ball to. So I don't know that they're that desperate to move out anymore.
They're not, but the debate here is, okay, Minnesota has 11 and 23.
The optic one?
If a team like Denver sitting at 12, Denver offers 12, and all they can offer is next year's first round.
Right.
So if you're
the optic one,
the
actually,
Chargers,
this one, I wasn't going to run an auction, but this one I got for 5
this year,
right now.
unless you're
So
just
if
going to
you're
gamble
interested
that,
in
well, the
that, I
Broncos
can
are
get that
terrible,
for you,
and we're
man.
going to beat
I think
them.
the last one did
They'll
about
be
like
a top 10
7,
pick again
8 bucks.
next year, and we'll be patient and
actually,
wait. Maybe they would want to do that, but I really think that the blue chip debate is one that happens in building.
Actually, I
right?
take that back. That one I could do 3 on if you're interested.
You want to get one of those top 3 receivers, assuming they have similar grades.
I was looking at the wrong comp,
or
but
you
yeah,
want to
$3
get the top
for this
tackle, which is, if it's Joe Alt. You're having that debate, and you don't want to go down too far where you lose one of those guys. But the Chargers could easily have this conversation and say, well, do we need receivers? Yes, it's a deep class. And so the debate would be like, we could take one Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors, or we might be able to get, say, Fashanu or Fuaga at 11, and then Brian Thomas Jr. at 23. Take your personal evaluation of Brian Thomas Jr. out of it. Wide receiver 4 could be available at 23. That might be attractive for the Chargers. We could have 2 starters, or 1 elite receiver. Would they take that?
But I don't think that the limiting factor here is not necessarily does Minnesota just need to beat Denver or the Raiders, right? Like the fact, like if you look at it in a vacuum, pick numbers 11 and 23 theoretically get you to 5, pretty much dead on in terms of the Jimmy Johnson trade value, et cetera. And that's more than Denver can offer effectively, right? I mean, they can offer more, but they need to do it in a way that seems overkill. If it's a better deal than 12 plus next year's first rounder, which is the sort of standard, what you would assume Denver's deal is starting with. But just because they beat Denver's deal doesn't necessarily mean that's all they need to give up, because the Chargers can effectively say, look, this is a deal you can make happen. There's no guarantee that you can make a deal happen, the same deal happen for pick number 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever. Like the further you go down, now you're making it easier for Denver to get into one of those spots. So they might beat you to the next pick, or those teams might just not want to take the deal, right? So just because on paper picks number 11 and 23 get you to 5 doesn't mean the Chargers can't also squeeze an extra draft pick out of them, because the Vikings might not want to run the risk that they can make a deal happen with somebody else.
Any predictions on how it ends up going down?
Oh, so and then the third element of this was Arizona, right? Yes, Arizona might not want to trade down from where they are and miss out on a top wide receiver because, in theory, going down to number 11, you might miss out on the top 3.
Right.
You might be down to wide receiver 4 at that point. And I do think that everybody views this as a big 3, then a gap, then wide receiver 4 through whatever, however you have them ordered, right?
And as the Cardinals, you already have 2 first-round picks. So do you need, it's nice coming out with 3 first-round picks. Those years are fun.
Yeah.
But are you content with, hey, we've got 2 first-rounders. One of them is the best non-quarterback in the draft. We're good with that.
So you could do that, but also they've already done this. What if they trade down and then come back up for a receiver?
They come back up.
So this is the thing. Like Arizona might be open for business.
Hey, what's going on,
And
man?
maybe they don't want to trade down to 11. Ideally they would want to trade to 6, 7.
Yeah.
If that's not on the table, Arizona might be willing to trade down to 11 and then try and jump back up for one of those top 3 receivers, right? Now, and they might only need to trade up to like 11, or sorry, to like 9, right, from 11. What if Chicago is sitting there at 9 and Arizona says, okay, we'll give you something to move up 2 spots, you drop down 2, and all you miss out on is the luxury pick of Odunze as your 3rd wide receiver. You could drop down 2 spots and just pick a different position instead. Like, for Arizona, that might be the way they would do that deal.
As an aside, I think if you were reading the buzz for quarterbacks and their connections with teams, correct me if I'm wrong on this. Are you feeling the same thing? Jaden Daniels to Washington seems to be heating up more and more over the last few weeks. JJ McCarthy as a Patriot or a Viking. So either the Patriots at 3 or the Vikings coming up to get JJ McCarthy. And then Drake May with the Giants. And I think the more you talk to evaluators about Drake May, he seems like the one where people would love to have him sit for a year. I think him or JJ McCarthy, people would love to have sit for a year. JJ for general experience, and he's young, and May's young, right? And May is young and has specific footwork issues and quote unquote easy stuff issues, missing layups that people would love to iron out. So the Giants could be the perfect spot for Drake May at 6. So that's what I'm feeling as far as like those top teams and where they might fit. And then that puts the Raiders and the Broncos and the Vikings, right, as the 3 teams. If you love Drake May, do you have to get ahead of the Giants? If you love JJ McCarthy, do you have to get to 3? If you love Jaden Daniels, would you have to get to 2, to supersede Washington?
I mean, there was a report recently, I forget where it came from, that said that the Vikings, it was sort of terming it, of all the other quarterbacks, i.e. after Caleb Williams, that they love Drake May the most.
Yeah.
If you love Drake May the most and the sort of current smoke that's circulating out there in the pre-draft world is accurate, I mean, you might actually have a shot at getting Drake May at 11. Yeah. You might not even move anywhere. And if you are, that idea of, how comfortable are you trading up and giving up, a lot, maybe 2 first-round picks, maybe 3, to get up to 4 or 5 for QB4. But if QB4 is actually QB2 on your board, you feel better about it.
Yeah.
So this was like, that's where this gets interesting is, there will be a consensus ranking of these guys that goes Caleb Williams number 1, and then the next 3, 4, 5 in some order. And if you look at that on a board and say, this team traded up for QB4, feels not great. But that guy might be QB2 on their board. So if they traded up for the second best, what they believe is the second best quarterback in this draft, you can argue that, look, nobody's good enough to make that determination. But it does change how you view that trade, right?
Sure.
You traded up in theory for the second best guy, not the 4th.
Yeah. And no matter what you traded up for at the press conference, you're going to say, oh, yeah.
Of course. Like, he's the top guy.
He's our guy.
Yada.
He's our guy. Really quick, we're going to have Josh Lucas on later. We did not. We pre-recorded the interview. We did not get to ask him about the Mitch Trubisky decision that they were part of. But I did hear him in other interviews talk about you remember, Bears were sitting at 3. They traded up to 2.
Yeah.
They obviously had Trubisky as their top quarterback on the board. They had good information, what they thought was good information, that another team was trying to get to 2 to get Trubisky. So that's why they traded to 2 to lock it in, right? They were willing to give up that extra pick to do that. And they also went into the draft expecting either Mitch Trubisky or Patrick Mahomes. And of course, we know how it all turned out. We know in hindsight, it's like, You idiots! You picked the wrong guy.
Yeah.
But they were the team that was trying to play that game, right? Let's use inside information to figure out, are we going to be able to get our guy? Oh, no. Might miss out on him at 2. Let's go up to 2 to lock him in. And that's what they did.
We didn't talk about this that much with him, but one of the other things that sort of fits what we've just been talking about, they ended up viewing Justin Fields as the second best quarterback in that draft. So if you remember, like right at the start of the pre-draft process, that was how most people had it ordered.
Yeah.
Trevor Lawrence number 1, Justin Fields number 2, the rest, in some order beyond that. And then Zach Wilson emerged as the QB2.
You'll hear him say, though, so just a spoiler alert before he gets here, they may not have been in on Trey Lance, fine.
Right.
They may have been split on Zach Wilson. So in the building, at worst, Justin Fields was QB3, and he may have been QB2 for the Bears in that draft.
Yeah.
And they were sitting at pick 19 or 20 and had to trade up to 12.
So that's what I'm saying is when you sort of remember how that unfolded, they traded up for what at least apparently the majority of the building, because it got made, for what the majority of that building viewed was QB2 in that draft, right? That makes that process-wise look a lot better, right?
Yeah.
Like they traded up from lower middle of the first round up to that spot to grab what they believed was the second best quarterback in that draft, as opposed to he went 4th, right? He was the 4th quarterback taken.
He was 4th quarterback taken.
Yeah.
And
so it's literally exactly the same dynamic as we're talking about. You trade up QB4, it's like, and then that didn't work out, right? But you trade up for what you believe is QB2, it makes a lot more sense.
We're going to discuss this. We're going to throw it to that interview in a little bit here with Josh. But as he was breaking down what was going on with the Bears in 2021, I did have that flashback, and I had forgotten how uninspiring the Bears' offseason was leading into the draft.
Andy Dalton.
Well, yeah, because every other team, that was the year that Matthew Stafford was traded for by the Rams. And I think, Carson Wentz was being traded for. And all these other teams were making their moves. And every year this happens. Like, might be the Raiders right now. This might be the Broncos, right? The end of the musical chairs left the Bears with Andy Dalton, bridge quarterback. And it felt and they were picking in the middle of the first round.
Yeah.
Right. That's what felt awful about it. Every other team that needed a quarterback was picking pretty high.
That's the funny thing about it is you forget how. But at the time, as soon as Andy Dalton signed, it was like he's going to get Mike Glennon.
Hey, what's up,
right?
Wes?
Remember when it happened? This happened 3 years before that.
But the Bears were picking at 19 or 20, though.
No, I know.
They
That's the
didn't
thing.
know how that would look.
When Mike Glennon was signed, they signed Mike Glennon, then almost immediately drafted his successor, and it's like, oh, the Mike Glennon era is going to last 5 minutes, and we're on to the next guy. It was Trubisky. And then when Andy Dalton was signed, everyone was saying exactly the same thing. Andy Dalton's about to get Mike Glennon. This is not, but. So it was so obvious they were going to draft a quarterback in that draft, but they were starting from whatever it was, 20 or how far down were they? Yeah, 20. So it was like at pick number 20, people were convinced the Chicago Bears were going to draft Andy Dalton's immediate successor, and he was going to be in the job 5 minutes. That's how desperate they were for a quarterback that even though they were picking 20, everyone knew they were going to come out of that first round with a QB.
Brandon Katz in the chat is saying that the Bears didn't trade up. I mean, they did. They traded from 20?
20.
From 20 to 12.
Yeah.
They gave up a future first-round pick.
Right.
And you'll hear Josh hint at this, that and it's interesting how this goes, right? Ownership to 11. Yeah, sorry. The ownership essentially gave them, here's the package that you can offer, right? Which means, hey, they said we're willing to give up next year's first-round pick, so you guys can go get the quarterback that you want, and they moved up to pick 11. We never got our friend Rick Spielman to answer this too, because the Vikings were in that mix too, right? The Vikings ended up they traded down in that draft and took Christian Darrisaw, but then supposedly they were trying to get up to Fields at some point, and when they couldn't, then they traded down with the Jets, right? And they took Darrisaw.
And they traded down with Darrisaw on the board.
Yeah.
So they had Darrisaw.
I love that trade.
They traded down, and they still got him.
Process-wise, I love that trade, and I know Spielman didn't last in Minnesota more than the extra year. And the two extra picks that they got were like Kellen Mond and then the guard from Wyatt Davis, the guard from Ohio State. And at the time, I was like, oh, you have an upside guard and a backup quarterback. This is a genius trade. It did not work out whatsoever, but they got the same player that they wanted. and picked up 2 extra lottery tickets, so to speak.
Right.
So, all right, the last email that you wanted to.
Last email. This is more of a discussion. So Don Crehan just simply writes a couple of statements that I was supposed to react to. But anyway.
All he needs at the end is a discussion.
Right. The longer the ball is in the air, the more the skill needed to make it a completion shifts from the quarterback to the wide receiver. Beware of Jayden Daniels.
This is one of those things that sometimes I repeat things and I think that they're my own idea, but somewhere along the way I probably heard it and repeated it. What?
Pretty sure this has been my
I've been saying this
for a while.
I've been saying this for years. I actually remember where I heard it first.
Yeah, it was from me, sitting right opposite you.
No, it was actually from Aaron Schatz. I heard him saying this, and I agree. Like, I think we've always kind of known this intuitively. The longer the ball in the air, the longer the ball's in the air, the more it's a receiver-based skill, and data shows that it's one the deep ball completion percentage is far less stable than other areas of the field, and so yeah. I mean, you could be a good deep ball thrower. Like, I think Russell Wilson's a good deep ball thrower, but the actual results are definitely wide receiver driven.
It's a symbiotic relationship. Like, it isn't as simple as deep ball throwers are products of wide receivers. Like, you need the quarterback to understand where to put that ball in the air, but the further he's throwing it, the more the margin for error is massive, and the receiver is the one that can make up for that margin for error. But the quarterback needs to understand how to put a ball in the air that enables the receiver to maximize that margin for error. This is why Russell Wilson has been one of the best deep ball throwers in the NFL throughout his entire NFL career. It's not because he drops the ball into a bucket 50 yards downfield every time he throws it deep. It's because he puts, like the moon ball that Chris talks about on the broadcast, right? He puts more air under the ball than any other quarterback, basically, when he's throwing deep, which means it's up there for longer, which means even if it's off target, the receiver has more time to go and get in the space where it's about to drop to and make it look like it's an amazing, accurate deep ball. So, and like, there's so many times where, like, you can have the best deep receiver in the NFL, but you still need the quarterback to be able to give him a chance. And that's why Randy Moss worked amazingly well with any quarterback throwing him the ball, right? Because Randy Moss is maybe the greatest deep ball receiver in NFL history. But it's also why when you added Dante Culpepper to him, it went to a different level versus Randall Cunningham or, Jeff George or Brad Johnson. Like, Culpepper was one of the best deep ball throwing quarterbacks in the league. And the number of times where those two guys hooked up perfectly, where Moss makes a slight adjustment, but Culpepper also drops it in a bucket. And together that makes it literally unstoppable. That's what turned that into the greatest combination at the time in the NFL.
A few things off the top of my head as we wrap up this and send it to Josh. Alex Smith led the league in deep passing yards in 2017. Tyreek Hill. Tua is now one of the most effective deep ball throwers now that he has Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Patrick Mahomes' deep ball numbers have all gone south over the last 2 years. He's still great at everything, but the actual deep ball numbers do go down. So yeah, if you're going to apply this to Jayden Daniels, might be some truth there. Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr., are they the ones doing the hard work there for Jayden?
I mean, you can't at the very minimum, you can't not factor that in. Like, it's the whether or not it's everything or it's just a massive component of it. You can't simply look at a guy's deep ball, even the tape. Like, forget the numbers, even just tape. And go, oh, look at these deep balls, and not start factoring in what the receivers are doing at the other end of that, which I think a lot of people do. A lot of people simply look at where the ball lands relative to the wide receiver. Look, it landed right in his hands. That's a dime. You're like, well, it wasn't when it left his hand. It only became a dime once the receiver moved laterally 2 yards and, slowed his pace and then extended right at the end. Like, the receiver turned that into a dime. It gave him a shot, but it wasn't the dime you think it was just by looking at where the ball landed.
All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to bring in Josh Lucas right now. The show's going to end right after that, so I'll have no outro. This is it. Hey, love you guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow's our O-line show. We'll bring in Ramon Foster to break it all down. But right now, Josh Lucas, Director of Player Personnel for the Bears, breaking down Justin Fields, Caleb Williams, all those decisions for the Bears. We'll see you again tomorrow, guys. All right, we are thrilled to be joined by Josh Lucas, the Director of Player Personnel for the Chicago Bears, 2015 to 21. Josh, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
What's up,
This is exciting because we were sitting here in these seats, Sam, a couple of years ago, debating the 5 quarterbacks in the 2021 draft class, and Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, and everything. And Josh, you were in the room when Justin Fields was drafted and all the decisions that the Bears made. I've heard you discuss this a little bit. Can you give us a little background on how the Bears kind of landed at Justin Fields, what the thought process was, what you guys were thinking going into draft day, whatever you can divulge, of course.
Well, I'll be perfectly candid. You know, the moment the 20 season ended and Coach Nagy and the GM Ryan Pace, you know, were not extended and kind of, you know, you're going into your last year. And we knew Mitch was heading out of the building. Andy Dalton was a good signing for us as a bridge, but let's be honest, we had to take a quarterback. You know, we were in one of those unfortunate situations where to save our asses, we had to take a quarterback. Obviously, there was some depth in that first round. I think what most people forget is that 2020 year, we were in the playoffs, so we weren't a top 10 picking team that was going to have the luxury to kind of, you know, move way up in the draft to get any of the five. You know, we backed into the playoffs that year. I think we were picking 19. The ownership president at the time, I think, gave, you know, coach and GM, you know, a parameter of this is the ammo you can use and this is how far you can go up. We were well aware Jacksonville was obviously going to take Trevor Lawrence. It was very well known, I think, throughout the league that the Jets were going to take Zach Wilson. For us, it was Justin and Mac. We didn't have the grades. We didn't have the vision for Trey Lance, you know, as a first-round quarterback in our building. And Justin and Mac had a lot of love throughout the building through various people. You're talking about polar opposite prospects. Couldn't be more opposite. You know, one would win with timing, processing, you know, and getting it out to his playmakers as fast as you can. And one obviously a little more methodical, a little bit more of a power deep ball thrower who had rare physical makeup. And that decision literally came down to, you know, the day of the draft. And, you know, as I just mentioned, they both did really well in the interview process. COVID, so there wasn't as much contact. It was a very strange year for as far as evaluating quarterbacks. Everything was Zoom related. But when you just looked at the board the day of the draft and you really just looked at the grades, you know, the building overwhelmingly, I think, was tilted towards Justin. And obviously, when you're picking where we're picking, knowing that this is probably going to be a pick that's going to be anywhere from 8 to 15, you know, you're going to get a quarterback who obviously has first round pedigree, has a lot of ability, but there's going to be some question marks on him as well. We had some concerns with Justin on just how methodical he played in the pocket, kind of how slow he could be as far as getting the ball off. And we felt really good. We used the S2 score. We were big believers in that score and that component, and he had scored really well on that test as well as some other tests. And we thought he had the time, you know, he could get to his 10,000 hours in the league where that mental process would speed up because he had phenomenal athletic skill that would allow it to buy him time. He could create explosive offense with his legs through design runs, through extended plays. And as time would build up and he got more experience, we thought that processing getting the ball off quick to the original
What's going
read
on,
in
what's
the
the real?
offense
Let me know what you're looking for, man.
would really improve. And that was our kind of vision for the player. Our main concern, I think, was, is this just 2 years starting quarterback in college that needs more time? He's playing around phenomenal talent, offensive line and perimeter skill. He's got more time to operate. Or is this like a lack of instinct? And that was our big question. And after 3 years, I would say, I think there's a little bit of an instinct issue there. And it's why I think the league just told you he's viewed as a backup quarterback right now more than he's viewed as a starting quarterback. Tremendous person. I won't bet against him having success going forward because he's always going to be well liked in the locker room. He's always going to work his ass off. He's always going to have those legs to buy him, plays that others can't. He just needs to speed up the process, and he really just needs to trust the offense. You watch the tape, the throws are within his vision. He just doesn't let it go sometimes, and it leads to holding the ball. It leads to costly sacks, and what it really leads to is uneven offense. 1 week, this is the guy. Next week, he's not the guy. So that's kind of the backstory on Justin.
It's interesting from the outside when you're trying to sort of evaluate the draft. A lot of it is trying to piece together the puzzle of like the consensus and how people view quarterbacks and where the overall body ranks these guys. And when you go back to that draft class, Trevor Lawrence was basically all the way along the consensus number one guy and seen as this generational type of prospect. But right at the start, it was people saying it was Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. And there were maybe even some questions about maybe Fields has a higher upside than Lawrence and he could be the number one guy. And then quite early on in the process, it was Zach Wilson is now consensus QB2, right? And that became the order. And then it was now we've got Mac Jones, Trey Lance, and Justin Fields and figure out what the order is based off your preference. How did that work inside the building? Like what did that order, did the ranking change over time, or how quickly did you kind of set on your ranking of those guys? And similarly, like this year, so we all treat it like, it's a moving puzzle, and now you've got the Drake May versus Jaden Daniels versus JJ McCarthy conversation. Like, how early is this getting set within team buildings, and how did you rank those guys at the time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, going back to 21, and even going back to last year, that S2 score holds weight. Trust me. When you had Stroud and Bryce last year.
And you only had a couple of years of S2 data at that point, right? But it was starting to really
back to like 16.
Yeah.
So obviously last year, a few more years.
So you're looking at Mahomes and Lamar and some of the guys who were hitting were probably high S2 guys as you're seeing the score for Fields come in.
Yeah, it's been very accurate. It's been very accurate on guys that have scored poorly on it, and then Stroud just completely flipped the whole narrative on that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I think that influenced some of the draft boards in 21 because a lot of these guys scored really highly on it. And I think Trey Lance is a guy that got boosted up after that test came out a little bit. And then obviously last year, I think people around the league were very concerned, obviously, with the reported score of CJ Stroud. I don't know what he actually scored. That's one small component of it. For us, going back to 21, I think us knowing ahead of time. Now, Trevor Lawrence, that was done. Like, everyone knew that. He didn't even take the test. But going outside the test, going just off of the person and going on tape, it was very helpful for us that Zach was likely going to New York because I should be allowed to say this. Like, we were not in agreement on Zach Wilson when you're talking coaches versus scouts, and that would have been a major, long, drawn out watching tape, and we were on two different planets as far as personnel and coaching. So for us, you know, it really was just the three guys, and you know, we had some guys that liked Trey, but obviously the grades, you know, favored Mac and Justin. So for us, it was pretty nice to just really focus in on two guys, let our coaches really bury in with two guys, and then come up with a final a ranking with those two. This year's class, good luck. You know, I think Caleb obviously does things on tape that is clear as day, separates him from the other three. You know, from an instinct standpoint, from an off-script playmaking standpoint, he's a natural thrower. You know, on platform, 65, 75-yard balls in the air on a dime. You know, backpedaling, you know, throwing funny body angle throw, you know, from his hip, 30 yards downfield. Like, he just has freaky ability that other guys don't have. Not to say that he doesn't have issues. You know, you don't love his height. You don't love his hand size. He has to learn to play, you know, within a system and not just let every play turn into a scramble drill. And those are going to be some habits that are going to be hard to break. But he's got unique talent, in my opinion, as far as the ability to throw the ball, and he's a very instinctual runner. These next three guys, I bet you let's say Bears are taking Caleb. Now you got 31 teams ranking three guys. I bet you those rankings are all over the place. And I could make an argument for all three of them to be the second quarterback.
Should Michael Penix be in that discussion too? Is it three or is it four?
I don't know enough about the medical.
Yeah.
Just the tape, to me, I say yes, because if Tua was a top 5 pick, top 6 pick, and you look at those two college tape side by side, to me it's very similar. Very similar. And I know it's a lot of it because it's coming out of the left hand and it looks similar. But as far as like timing, downfield throwing, like, it's very unique. Both of them have issues with, can they play extended when the play breaks down and it's not timing and rhythm? Can they make a living in the NFL playing, you know, excel in that area where I think Tua has shown he's really limited in that area. I think people have the same concern with Penix. So when I group these quarterbacks, he'd be like a notch down from the next three. But, you know, Jaden's got special physical traits. His legs are going to buy him a lot of explosive offense. I don't know that he sees it as well as you want from the pocket. I'm hearing people say that he's one of the better as far as throwing on time and processing. I don't see that on tape. I saw a guy that had the luxury of playing 5 years of college football, much more time on task than everyone else, surrounded by tremendous talent, and he has tremendous talent. But there's question marks there. Now, here, the one thing about Jaden is when you get into these mobile quarterbacks, they're going to take shots. They're going to get hit. Their ability is going to be a real thing. What I do like about Jaden, even though he's got a light body frame, and this reminds me of Lamar a little bit, some guys just fall differently. Some guys just take shots differently.
Hey, y'all, just let me know what y'all looking for.
Anthony Richardson from last year. You're talking about a fantastic talent who's got this big, beautiful body that you would think is built for contact. But when you watch him play, every hit looks like a train wreck. And it's explosive. And it looks like it's going to lend to a lot of injuries. where Jaden I'm not as concerned about because he can kind of get down, he can kind of glance off the hits. So I think that's going to be a strength for Jaden. Moving on to JJ, if you want to talk about all four of these top four quarterbacks, he's the only one to me that elevated his program. He went into a college and elevated that program big time. You can make an argument a little bit with obviously Caleb as a sophomore, but let's face it, they were very disappointing this year. Drake May, disappointing this year as far as elevating the program. Lost to Virginia, lost to Georgia Tech. The Miami game, when they came out throwing the ball, I thought they struggled, and then they won that game when they started to run the ball. Go to JU and Jaden. They played three teams with a pulse this year, and Ole Miss, Florida State, and Alabama. And he's 0-3. And I know a lot of people want to say it's the defense; they couldn't stop anyone. There's something rare about JJ as far as his makeup and his ability to galvanize those other 10 guys. And that's when you see the multiplying effect. And everyone wants to talk about there wasn't enough load, there wasn't enough, they didn't put enough on JJ. Like, he was propped up by Michigan. I see it totally differently. And as someone who's followed the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry as passionately as anyone's followed it in the last, 20, 30 years, he changed the rivalry. He won both those games. Go back and watch that tape in Columbus 2 years ago. Those throws he made on third down, the first one on the zero blitz, he won that game. This year, they couldn't get him off the field on third down. There's something special about him, but he's got question marks. The arm strength. He throws at one pace. He doesn't have any touch to his ball. Everything's one speed. There's a lot of question marks there. I'm being long-winded. You can rank those guys. Like, everyone's going to pick a favorite of those three, I think, after Caleb. They all deserve to be first-round picks, but I think all three of those guys are going to have to be surrounded by solid cast of players versus Caleb may be one of those quarterbacks that you could drop him into any of the 32 buckets and he'll elevate. He'll be able to play like a high-level NFL football.
So that's one of the questions about Justin Fields. His time in Chicago was the offensive line intact? Were the playmakers intact for him to succeed? Do you think Caleb Williams and what is in Chicago right now, do you think he has the infrastructure to succeed? I know you're saying, hey, he can elevate wherever he goes, but what are your thoughts on the supporting cast with the Bears right now?
Yeah, the Chicago Bears are sitting pretty right now. Justin did not walk into a situation anywhere near what Caleb's about to walk into. They're on year 3 of their rebuild. They have done a tremendous job through the draft and through signing free agents on building up both sides of the ball. Very balanced. They've been pragmatic. I think they've been they've just hit on a lot of players. Defensively, they have to add several pass rushers. I think they're pretty complete throughout the back seven. But what Caleb's walking into, you'd have to show me a number 1 overall quarterback who's walked into a better situation offensively, especially if they take a receiver at 9.
Right.
I personally think they're going to address the pass rush, at 9 with some of the players that are going to be available there. But even if they don't, they'll find a third receiver. Could be the Cincinnati kid they drafted last year. But with Keenan and DJ, they got 2 better than average tight ends. I think people don't realize how good that offensive line can be when it's healthy. Tevin Jenkins healthy is a really good guard. The right tackle has a chance to be special. The left tackle is functional. They got running backs. They had running backs last year. Now you add DeAndre Swift, new offensive coordinator. he's good. He's not going to have a ton of excuses of he just doesn't have enough around him. Because day one, he's going to have enough around him. And that is a huge luxury when you're picking number one overall in the draft. Because you go back, Luck's the last number one overall quarterback to take his team to the playoffs. And you go back and look at that roster. They hit on T.Y. Hilton in the third round that year. Even they drafted 2 tight ends in the second round that year, and they had Reggie Wayne, still on the team and obviously still playing well. But you look at the whole cast of characters. I would, and that team made the playoffs. Like I said, I think this Bears offense has more talent, top to bottom, than that 2012 Colts team did. Now Andrew obviously was a special player and was on his way to having a special career until he retired. So, there's no guarantee Caleb's going to play to that level Andrew played to. But yeah, as far as the situation goes, if you're a Chicago Bears fan right now, I'm uber excited about where this team's headed because they're going to have a lot of good players.
Last question, Josh, just because you mentioned the scouts and the coaches, the personnel department and the coaches kind of battling it out. Do you have any good draft stories historically where there was a battle, personnel versus coaches? Who won the battle, and how did it play out?
I just don't want to mention. It's hard here to mention names. Every year there's one. I felt every year there was one or two. And I'll just say this: I've been on the side where I didn't win. We didn't pick the guy that I thought we should pick, and have been right. And I've been on the side where we made a decision, and the decision that was made was right. So I've been on both sides of it. I remember our first draft. I can talk about this as it was a later round pick. Me and other scouts really liked Adrian Amos, especially in the 5th round. And he was a kind of corner safety conversion. We looked at him just as a safety, but he had some corner experience at Penn State. And I won't name names, but there were some people in the building that were worried about his toughness to play the position. And there was a nice little long, drawn-out argument before that pick. Obviously,
is there
minutes
a
later in the
team
draft,
you're interested in?
Heads,
or players?
calm down
those for you if you want.
things chill out pretty quickly. Talking about a 5th round pick.
Chiefs? Gotcha,
usually the first round pick, those discussions, and obviously if they get heated, that's done well before the draft. You pretty much know, this is our circle of guys. But you're always going to have that every year, especially when there's guys on the board where,
so
regardless of round,
gotcha.
the offensive coaches really like someone and the defensive coaches really like someone, and that's when the GM's got it. That's a hard job, and I think what Ryan did really, really well in our 7 years in Chicago was kind of make sure he kind of kept it balanced, throwing bones to the offense, to the defense. But this draft stuff's hard. I'm doing a top 10 player thing on Friday on a local podcast, and I was just looking back at past drafts. I'm going to give the top 10 players, in my opinion, in this draft on Friday. And I already know I'm wrong. Go back to 2019 and look at the top 10 players. It's subjective, but look at the top 10 players in the NFL from the 2019 draft. Very few of them were taken in the first round. Most of them were mid to later round picks. You look at the Kansas City Chiefs dynasty. Patrick Mahomes, obviously, most important draft pick in Chiefs history, best quarterback probably ever to play, first round pick. But you look at their other Hall of Fame players, Kelsey, not a first-round pick. Chris Jones, not a first-round pick. Tyreek Hill, obviously it was a different team, not a first-round pick. It's hard, Go back to the receiver debate of 21, I believe, 20 or 21. I think it was 20.
Yeah,
I thought Jalen Reagor
and those guys.
I thought Jalen Reagor was going to go before Justin Jefferson.
He did.
One thing to add, yeah.
Like how, and I'm pumping my chest on draft day. Like I told you guys, look at that difference. Justin Jefferson's the best receiver in the NFL. Reagor's, trying to, hang on to jobs, going from team to team. And Case and Coach Nagy, they love Justin Jefferson. And I thought Reagor, because of the speed, was going to be, special. And I thought Jefferson was going to be more of just like a slot guy. Like the draft
Marquez
is hard.
Scantling on the Prism.
Of these 4 quarterbacks that are taken, we all know, us 3, all 4 of them aren't going to be star quarterbacks. 3 of them probably won't be star quarterbacks. And there's a really good chance that only 1 or 2 of them are going to be guys that are going to be playing for this franchise, going forward into second contracts. So, yeah, there's, there's always different opinions and fights and arguments during draft time. And that's when the GM's got to do his work to keep everyone as cohesive as possible.
Well, Josh, we appreciate you taking the time. A lot of fun looking back at the Bears, some of their draft picks, and looking forward to what's going to happen with Caleb Williams. So thanks again for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Welcome to the Athletic Football Show. I'm Robert Mays. Great show on tap for you guys today. We're digging into the pass catchers in the 2024 draft. It is a marquee group of names, some of the biggest stars in this class. And to help me do that, 2 of the best draft analysts that I know. First of all, it's my good friend, Nate Tyson. How you doing, man?
Good. I got analyst this time, not draft geek. So that's good.
You guys are moving on up in the world.
Moving on up. Yeah, not expert yet. Just analyst. Just guy with an internet connection. That's where we're at. Draft guy with an internet connection. I am doing very, very well. Excited for this one. This is a lot juicier pass catcher, wide receiver podcast than it was last year. So cannot wait to dive in.
Even as one of the world's biggest Zay Flowers fans, I have to agree with you on that. Also joining us today to dig into this group, it is our draft expert at The Athletic, the one, the only, Dane Brugler. Dane, how you doing, man?
I'm good. I turned in the Beast this morning to the design team, so it's equal parts relief and anxiety about not flip-flopping my number 15 and number 16 corners in my rankings. So I just have to learn to let go and trust my instinct and reasoning for why I did what I did. But look, the design team, they do a great job. They're going to have this a few days. And then, we're officially on schedule for next Wednesday for the draft guide to come out. So I cannot wait to share it with everybody.
So please, if you guys have not checked out the Beast in years past, it is truly an indispensable product around this time of year. It is the most exhaustive draft guide that you could ever hope to buy, hope to engage with if you care about the NFL draft. How many players, Dane, are in the draft guide overall?
1,967.
Okay.
NFL verified testing information for all those players, and then full reports on just over 400. So plenty of information to dive into.
400 guys.
Put in perspective what Dane does. He's a one-man scouting department. NFL teams have area scouts for each area of schools to just do but what Dane is doing, and that's just the information gathering and everything. Dane is actually evaluating these guys on top of it. So, yeah, one-man scouting department, Dane Brugler.
April 10th, please check that out at The Athletic. I'm telling you, there is nothing like it in this industry, and Dane does a phenomenal job. The other bit of housekeeping that we need to hit on, we are coming to you guys live from Detroit on nights 1 and 2 of the draft this year on YouTube. Me, Dane, Nate, some special guests. Got some cool bells and whistles on the way. So like last year, like we did the year before, not something you can attend. I'm sorry if that was unclear in the way that I was presenting it on the internet over the course of the last few days, but a live draft show that we will be doing that you can watch on YouTube. So we'll be with you guys for every single pick of the first 3 rounds. We'll be doing a little bit of stuff afterwards, a little bit of stuff beforehand. So just please be on the lookout for that. We'll have more information in terms of start times and when we're going to actually go live, but just mark your calendars that we will be coming to you, the Athletic Football Show. It's our 4th edition of the live draft show, Nate.
Yeah, right? Yeah,
I think so.
4th.
And this is going to be the best one that we've done. So I can confidently say that because we're, as Nate is moving on up from geek to analyst, we are moving on up in the quality of production that we're going to be able to pull off. So
Test with 2 phones. I'll never forget the Justin Fields pick, and your phone was vibrating as it's recording. So it was just like moving.
My phone died halfway through the broadcast because I got so many text messages that eventually it just melted over the course of the show.
Overheated. We come a long, long way. The Fat Boy Slim has a song about this.
All right, we're going to dig into the pass catchers today, and we're going to do some categories in the second half of the show so we can hit a bunch of different guys in this class. So unlike the quarterbacks, obviously, the guys drafted in rounds 3, rounds 4, these are potential starters, the potential stars, Puka Nakuas of the world. Those happen every single year. So we want to hit a bunch of different names for you guys to keep an eye on, but this class isn't just deep. It has real star power at the top. I mean, arguably the best group of top-end receivers that we've seen come through the draft in several years. And that starts with Marvin Harrison Jr. for most people who are doing this from Ohio State. Nate, I want to start with you here just because there's been a lot of talk about how to stack these top guys recently. There's been some buzz about whether Neighbors should be above Harrison, how many teams have that. I think the gap is closed for some people as that this process is going along. You've been pretty rock solid the whole time, though, in your belief that Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best wide receiver in this draft. What separates him from the rest of this group in your opinion?
True cleanliness with the size and athletic traits that you want. He has the whole total package to me of not only having, of course, almost 6'4", 205, 210-pound range. Length isn't overwhelming. He's just kind of average length. But you don't see technicians like this in this frame, especially coming out of college, especially with production. So he has production, underlying production as well. So you have box score stats with a terrible situation last year as far as quarterback play, which we can get into, but also underlying production as far as advanced stats, first downs per route run, yards per route run, those types of things. And then on top of it, a 301 level route runner at his size, with hands, with ball skills, with strength. And he did not test, but you can see him on film. And just, again, this is the eye test alert, but it stacks up, is him taking the top off the defense, stacking on top of corners, being able to run true post routes down the field, and come away with the ball. His ball skills are great. It's not a true dunk on you guy, but his ability to adjust for balls and come down with them strong, it's truly exceptional. So to me, he's the total package. Does he not? He might not have that elite Randy Moss speed, but not a lot of people do. And he might not have, some other things that Calvin Johnson, he's not 230 pounds doing all this. But man, there's not a lot of guys that are this clean at that size with production already that I think can just scream into the league and just be a productive guy.
Even as a draft moonlighter game, he's a name that I've heard for years. And somebody who doesn't watch a lot of college football, you'd have to actively been trying to avoid it to not hear about what type of prospect he is. Have you ever wavered? Has there ever been any moment over the last couple of years where you've had doubts about whether he belonged in the top 5 overall players in this class?
No, and I took heat because going back to a year ago, before last year's draft, I said that this would be the easy wide receiver 1 if he were draft eligible. And I got a lot of pushback on that. And then I think over time, people were like, okay, yeah, this guy's legit. And the funny thing is,
who did they think should have been?
Well, they're like
Well,
Jason.
this was before the 2022 season. So like
okay.
he had like 10 catches. So like, but those the 10 catches he made were like, okay, this guy's a dude. And I think a lot of people were programmed that Jackson Smith and Jigba, Emeka Ibuka were even better receivers on his own team. I mean, the Ohio State receiving depth chart is just like Russian nesting dolls. It's like one, okay, another, like it's crazy. But the funny thing is with Harrison, he wasn't really supposed to be this guy. He was a 4-star recruit, so I'm not saying he came out of nowhere, but he was the 16th overall ranked recruit in Ohio State's 2021 class. And then obviously people knew his name, being the son of a Hall of Famer, but he wasn't being talked about as the guy as a freshman. First time I ever put eyes on him was that Rose Bowl against Utah when Smith and Jigba, C.J. Stroud both went off. But that was also his first start because Olave, Garrett Wilson, they opted out, get ready for the draft. And Harrison had 3 touchdowns in that game. And it was immediately when you watched him, it was like, all right, this guy is different. And so this past year, I went down to Columbus in October. I wanted to see him in person. I was like, okay, yeah, the tape is amazing. This is a clear top 5 player in the draft, maybe the number 1 overall player. I want to get eyes on him, my own eyes on him, just to see make sure I'm not lying to myself. And I was mentally preparing to have my expectations tempered because the tape was just that good. The hype was so high. But watching him in warmups from the sideline, I was pretty odd. I was like, okay, yeah, everything that Nate said about him as an athlete at that size, I mean, he's doing what a lot of smaller athletes can do, but in a bigger body. And watching that game throughout the game, the first quarter, Kyle McCord, he couldn't find him. Maryland's winning. And then in the second quarter, it was like Ryan Day started calling the screw it, just find number 18 plays. And it was over right away. It was over. And Harrison was the offense. And so I think what stands out the most for me with him is just the athletic dexterity for a guy that's 6'3", 210. And it's both before the catch and then during the catch. Before the catch, explosive off the line, very controlled. His pacing, his route construction is awesome. And I think that's above all what you love about him is he has the athletic gifts to beat college corners with just quickness and speed, but he's doing complex stuff out there. Exactly what Nate was saying. The body fakes, the stem angles. He has said that he does not enjoy running fades or goes. He doesn't like running those routes because he doesn't want to run routes where he's just bigger and faster. He wants to show off the craftiness. He wants to show off how good of a route runner he is. So that's what he wants to do as a receiver, and that's honestly really refreshing. So that's before the catch, and then at the catch, he might be even better. It's that rare ability to slow down the ball with his eyes. That's something that Larry Fitzgerald could do. Chris Carter could do it. I think Harrison has it. His tracking, his adjustment skills, they're uncanny. So then, and throw in the catch radius. And there's no other receiver in this class that has caught more footballs in practice. He actually is a partner with a state-of-the-art, or the company that made the state-of-the-art jugs machine, and he uses it religiously every single day. So it's just that the total package of what. I certainly said a total package because there are. I wish he was a little more physical. After the catch isn't great. He's not a make you miss type of guy. So I won't say the total package, but in terms of getting open and catching the football, he's got everything you want.
This guy plays quarterback real well. He's not just an athlete. Marvin Harrison plays receiver really well. He is a wide receiver technician. So your phrase, dexterity, that is perfect, Dane. Feet dexterity, his foot tightness and quickness and balance. And then the hand-eye coordination. That's such a great way to put it.
Seeing it in person, just watching him warm up, I was blown away. I mean, just the ankle flexion, the way his body moved. The body control is different. It's just different than watching other receivers. There's no rigidness, no stiffness at all. It's really impressive to watch.
What's really encouraging is that as we're scouting these receivers in modern day college football, there's so many guys